Gentlemen, girls and boys, and assembled company, welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe. I'm sitting at Bromyard Folk Festival in England. Mike was here earlier, in fact, Mike Rust, and
yeah,
he's now gone home. I'm sitting in my van still, so Mike will run the meeting as is usual. So we've got a few people in. I'm sure Mike will get a correct order, but Mike's going to actually start with a few dedications to Her Majesty, and I'm going to hand over to Mike. Have a wonderful evening. Just before I go, the next thing we've got coming up is on Tuesday, which is our young international tellers at 5 o'clock. So if anyone's got any young people that would like to tell, just encourage them to join. Meanwhile, Mr. Mike Rust, get a word in edgeways. Over to you.
Thanks, John. Yeah, and I had a lovely time at Bromyard Folk Festival. Bromyard Folk Festival, for those that don't know, is here on the Welsh Marsh. Bromyard is a little market town, and that goes back a long, long way, goes right back into the history of our nation. And it was the first one I ever went to. So my daughter's now 42, so it's 43 years ago. But I'm only 21 myself, so I don't know how I managed it. Time must be different. Right. So I'm going to start off by saying how sad we all are in the UK, plus all the Commonwealth territories and across the world. And I know that the words come in from all sorts of places. Your president, Baba, has been very nice, and his words were greatly appreciated. So were yours, Despina. And Valentina, I'm not sure which country you're from. So where are you from?
From Italy. I'm from Venice.
Oh, well, your Prime Minister was very kind, and we listened to what he had to say. So thank you very much. Right. So I'm going to start off with a couple of short stories about Her Majesty, because this is a storytelling man. And I have a couple. I have a very personal one, because my father was given an MBE. Now, MBE is a medal, for those of you, and it's a member of the British Empire, is what it actually stands for. But there's two of them. There's an MBE and there's an OBE. And the MBE stands for my blinking effort, and the OBE stands for other buggers' effort. So if you get an MBE, that's because you've done something good. If you get an OBE, someone's given you because your servants managed to do all the work and you're just getting the glory or something. So Dad got an MBE. so Dad got an MBE, and so we had to go to the palace. Now I'm one of 6. And so my sister Jill, and there were 5 boys. So we had a lot. We drew tickets, and my younger brother Simon won. So the 2 people from the family was Jill and my younger brother Simon, and because you could only take 2 in, Mum and Dad. So Jill decided that she'd drive her car up to London, pick Mum and Dad up from the station, drive round to Buckingham Palace. So she drives into Buckingham Palace, and this is a few years ago, Colin, when the IRA was still knocking around and things like that. So this is the royal security. Now, if you don't, those of you who don't know Buckingham Palace, it's a quadrangle. You only ever see the beginning at the front of Buckingham Palace, but behind it's a square building, and in the middle they made it into the car park when they invented cars. So you have to go through the royal security. That's all the soldiers with the bear skins and the guns and everything else. Then you have to go through the Metropolitan London Police security, which is protecting Her Majesty from anybody who wants to blow her up, whether it's lots of people want to blow her up. So you do all your bomb checks and everything else. Then you have to sign in. And then finally, 2 soldiers will take you in and they will park your car. And Dad starts to get out, and so does my younger brother and my mum. And my sister starts putting the driving lock on the car, right? And which is the anti-thief theft lock. And the soldier went, "What do you think you're doing?" And Jill goes, "Well, London, it's a very dangerous place. Someone might want to nick my car." You know. And the soldier takes a step backwards, looks at it, comes backwards and says, "If anybody's going to nick a car in here, it's going to be a lot newer than that thing." Turns around and walks out. Okay, so that's the one we've got. The other one, famous one, and I don't know if you know this, Colin, but it happened up in Balmoral. Now, Balmoral is where we all know it was her last resting place and where it all happened. But the Queen, Her Majesty, loved being there, and she'd go for long walks. But when she goes for a long walk, and she was about in the 50s when all this happened, she had to take a security guard with her. And the security guard was one of the Scots Guards, great big lad in a kilt, and he'd walk about a couple of yards behind. And she went round the corner in the middle of the forest, and there was an American tourist, Bubba. Okay, and you can spot an American tourist because they've got a baseball hat the wrong way round, they're chewing gum, and they've got 5 cameras on them. Right, they're typical American. Okay, and he comes marching up, and he goes, "I say," in an American accent, like, "I think I'm a bit lost. What's the best way to get back to the road?" And so the Queen starts giving him directions. You see, he goes, "Go down there, turn left, and go across there, and you'll be okay." And he turns around and he goes, "I know this is the Queen's estate. I don't suppose you've ever met the Queen, have you?" And so the Queen turns around to the security officer. He goes, "No, I've never met her, but he has," pointing at the soldier. So this is her sense of humor all over it. Anyway, so the American turns around and goes, "Have you really met the Queen?" And the soldier goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Could I have a photograph of you and me together? Then when I go back to America, I can say I've met someone who's met the Queen." And he picks up the camera and he gives it to the Queen and says, "Would you take the photograph, please?" Right? So the Queen goes, "Of course," takes a step backwards and takes a photograph of the American tourist and the soldier together. And then the Queen says, "Perhaps, because I've never met the Queen, but by the time you get back to America, I'm staying up here for a few days. Perhaps I will have met the Queen as well by then. So there's a good chance I'm going to meet the Queen in the next couple of days. Perhaps you will need to take one of me." And she handed the camera to the soldier, and the soldier duly took the photograph of the American tourist and Her Majesty standing there, followed the directions, off he went. Now, what I really want to know is, when she had the photos developed, because it was in the days when he developed photographs and everything else, what his wife said to him when he showed her the photographs of the soldier and Her Majesty at the same time. And the photograph is somewhere, I think it's emerged in an American newspaper. There's lots of stuff going around in America at the moment. And I think if it hasn't emerged, it's going to emerge. So there's a couple of little stories. And I just like to say, I started off by saying my personal feelings, and I know from it, as I'm sad, but I think we've got a new king and a new era. And I've got confidence. I don't know what Colin and Janet and John think of Charlie Boy, as I call him, but I think it's beginning to remind me of his grandfather, the old King George, more than he's reminding me of his mum and his dad, the old Duke. And the old King George was a fine rhymer. He was the one who saw us through the war and everything else. So, and he's beginning to remind me of that. And if that's right, then that's good, and that's very cool.
But what I want to know, Mike, is if we were new Elizabethans previously, are we now a bunch of Charlies?
Well, we've always have been a bunch of Charlies, mate. And I think we could be mugs as well. But I do think, though, that Camilla, who is the Queen Consort, in Shropshire, she's got another name already. She's known as Mrs. King. And I think she's going to be known as Mrs. King. I can see that happening. And we've got a new Princess of Wales, which is Kate, and I think that's going to be great. I think she's going to be fine. Right. So anyway, I'm talking to Colin. Would you go first, Colin? Because have you got to get away tonight? Or you got something else up?
No, I'm good. I'm okay tonight, Mike.
Okay. Well, if you go first, and I'll put it back in order together. So I'm going to go Colin, Baba, Despina, Janet, and now Valentina. Are you telling stories tonight?
I can. Yes.
Yes, absolutely, you can. Right. Right. I'm not sure if we've had the. If I've had the privilege of meeting you yet, or
no, I don't think so. But Colin invited me, and I
Oh, right.
decided to join last minute.
No, absolutely. Colin's now going to do a story. Would you do one after Colin? Would you go number 2?
Yeah, why not?
Absolutely. Let's do that. Okay, then. So it's going to be Colin, Valentina, Baba. Okay. Right, Cole. Over to Larne in Northern Ireland, where the sun always shines and the rain never drops a drop.
Not a drop. Not a drop. I'm gonna try a wee. Am I unmuted? I am unmuted, aren't I? Yeah, actually, I'm not gonna do a wee story tonight. I'm gonna do that poem that I told you about. I did this wee poem just back from Cape Clear, the festival there, and I did this wee poem as a kind of an introduction to the to a story that I was doing. But I was telling them last night on the barn session, Liz Weir's barn session, that when I was a wee lad, it was still fashionable to collect birds' eggs. I'm very glad that that is now no longer the case, and I'm a tiny little bit ashamed that I collected birds' eggs when I was a wee lad. But there seemed to be a lot more birds about then. And there was a place near to where I lived called the Slob Lands, and it was a big flat area full of wee pools and small ponds and so on. And there were it was a great place for wildlife, and there were lots of swans there. And of course, it was a terrifying thing for a wee 10-year-old boy to go to a swan's nest and try and take an egg, because they were very territorial and very aggressive and so on, and they would attack you. And of course, we fired up our own imaginations and tried to scare each other with these stories, because our fathers had told us that a swan could break your arm or it could break your leg. I never actually met anyone who had been had their arm or their leg broken by a swan, but these are the kinds of things that they used to tell each other. But we used to tell each other this other thing to even more terrify ourselves, and that was that swans belonged to the Queen, and they were the Queen's birds. And if you got caught stealing an egg from a swan's nest, well, you would have to answer to the Queen, and God only knows what would have happened to you then. And so when we went to the Slob Lands in the springtime to try and get a swan's egg, we were absolutely terrified. And but anyway, I'm glad to say that is now no longer the fashion, and people don't do that kind of thing anymore. I'm very glad to say. But anyway, this is a wee poem that I wrote some time ago, and it's just simply called Swans. They say when swans are flying south in long formations from the north, they navigate by stars and sing all through the darkest hours. I'm told swans guide their youngsters from a land of ice and midnight sun. The old talk, all in praise of ancestors and their ancient ways. I've heard swans mate for life, the cob and pen in virgin white, renew their vows each year, and always keep their lovers near. I saw swans dance once on a lake and spread their graceful feathered capes, heads bowed, necks entwined, and kiss since ages out of mind. I know when swans give up the ghost, on silver moonlit waters float, her shroud the clinging mists, his restless soul forever drifts. I lay beneath a starry sky, my wine sleep full of mournful cries, all through the night to the dawn, wingtip to wingtip with a swan. And thank you very much. If I can follow that on, if you don't mind, with a wee song. And well, as I said earlier there, my father and my mother were the same generation as the Queen and Prince Philip. They were that generation that were born in the 1920s, lived through the 30s, came through the Second World War, and that generation just seemed to be made of sterner stuff. And my father was in the Royal Navy during the Second World War, and when I was a wee lad, we always used to watch the Remembrance Parade, and it's a habit that I have kept on all these years. And I was watching it a few years ago. My father passed on some time ago, and I still keep the habit up. And I was watching it a few years ago. I was watching all these old lads talking about their experiences during the Second World War and their youth, and many of them in their late 80s and early 90s were all moved to tears, and it moved me greatly to listen to them. And it kind of struck me that they weren't moved to tears necessarily because of what happened to them during the war. It was more a kind of mourning for their youth, because although they had lived through the Second World War, which was a terrible time, it was the time of their youth and the most precious time of their lives, and that kind of struck a chord with me, if you like. And I just left the TV and came in here, and I sat down and wrote this song, and it kind of just tumbled out of me in half an hour. And it kind of reminds me on my parents and my uncle. An uncle of mine gets a mention in this song. He was my mother's brother. He landed on Juno Beach with the Canadian Division in 1944. And it just reminds me on that generation and the way they saw themselves. It's just simply called Remembrance Day. So here it is. Old man on the bus, he's a million miles away. Sings to himself, it's a long way to Tipperary. Teenage kid says, hey mister, what are you wearing those medals for? Are you a hero from some old war? The people bow their heads, they look the other way. It's Remembrance Day. Juno Beach, 6th of June, 1944. I was just as young as you, maybe a little more. These medals are not for courage, son, or my chest would be bare. They just remind an old man like me that I was really there. The people hold their breath, they look the other way. It's Remembrance Day. I still hear the singing as we march down to the ships. The heaving sea, the burning oil, I remember I was sick. The screaming as we landed and the friends I lost that day. I still see their faces just like yesterday. The people hide their tears, and they look the other way. It's Remembrance Day. Old man Sitting on the bus, staring at the pouring rain, arm in arm in a daydream with his young love again. Teenage kid says, "Hey mister, what are you crying for?" Says it's a long way to the sweetest girl I know. The old man turns and smiles. He said, "It's just I've come a long, long way. It's Remembrance Day." The people bow their heads and they shed a little tear. It's Remembrance Day. It's Remembrance Day. It's a long way to Tipperary. It's a long way to go. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you very much, Colin. That's absolutely well done. I think you just hit the nail on the head. Great. Absolutely. Thank you for doing that. That's brilliant. Right. So we're going to go to Valentina. Next after Valentina, we're going to go to Baba. Okay. So Valentina.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. It needs to be a little bit loud if you can.
Okay, yeah, I can be louder. Maybe closer to the computer because I know it has some problems. Okay, so I didn't know the theme of the night was the Queen. I have never met the Queen, but I have a story about a Queen. And this is a story I collected in Portugal. I was trekking through Portugal in spring. And as I usually do, I don't have a tourist guide of the country, but I bring a folktale book of the country with me. And this is a story that I found there. It's about a queen who's not as nice and polite as the queen that we all know and celebrate tonight, because she was a very, very angry and frustrated queen. And we know when a woman in the house is not happy, no one in the house can be happy, right?
Yeah.
So the queen was napping at the king, and the king was napping at the counselor, and the counselor was napping at the servant, and the servant had his wife, and his wife to the kids. And so everyone in the whole reign was angry and fighting and arguing all the time. And the queen was not happy because she really, really, really wanted to have a baby, but she couldn't get pregnant. There was only one person, a girl, Maria, who was nice to everyone, and her heart was so warm and so graceful that when she entered a room, she could just melt anyone else's grudges. She was an orphan, but her mother was friend with the queen, and so the queen decided to grow this Maria, let her live in the castle with her. And she was such a nice girl, and her mother, before dying, told her, "Come, anytime you have a trouble, anytime you have problems, come to my grave. I'll be there for you." And so she did. She went to the grave every day. She brought flowers to her mother, and she talked to her mother. Not that her mother answered, but anyways, she went and she talked to her. And let's leave Maria there. One day, the queen, she was in a particularly bad mood, and to get out of the mood, she decided to take the carriage, 2 horses, and go through big, big, big gardens of the rain. And she strolled around, and she was just coming back in time for dinner when the 2 horses, they shied and they stopped. And the queen asked, "What's going on?" And so the 2 servants went and tried to understand, and they went back to her. They opened the door of the carriage and they brought to her a big, fat toad. The queen wanted to take the toad, and she put the toad on the lap, and she fell immediately in love with this big, fat toad. She started caressing the toad. She couldn't stop caressing and cuddling the toad. She looked at him in the eyes and she thought, oh, I so would like to have a baby just like you. And she was lost in these loving thoughts when one servant arrived and told her that her husband, the king, was afraid, was worried about her because she was not going back in time for dinner. And so the queen, she startled and she understood what was happening, and she left the toad and she went back home, and she went to the king, and during dinner she told him all about this big toad and how beautiful and wonderful and sweet this toad was. And the king was like, okay, maybe this thing about wanting a baby is going a little bit too far. Just go to bed, sleep on it. And the queen, very sad because she didn't feel understood, she went to sleep. And the following day she woke up. She didn't feel very well. She felt sick. She felt nauseous. She just laid in bed the whole day, and the following day the same, and the following day the same, till they understood that she was pregnant. And everyone was so happy in the rain. Finally, the queen was pregnant, so happy. And so those were the best 9 months of the reign since the queen became a queen. And the day arrived when she delivered a very nice little toad. And the queen was not surprised at all. She was happy. But the king and the rest of the reign, not so much. But it was just what she wanted. And she raised him as a prince. And the day came when the toad was at the age to get married. And so the queen called Maria. And she told her, I have a big privilege for you. I want you to marry the prince, my son. And Maria was, I'm really grateful. Thank you so much, queen, but I'd rather pass. So the queen got very angry and she told, you have 3 days to decide. Either you marry my son or off with your head. Up to you to decide. And Maria was the nicest and most grateful girl in the world, but she really didn't want to marry a toad. So she remembered what her mother said, that she could go to her, and she went to the grave. And she asked, Mother, what should I do? Marry the toad. What? Because she always went to talk with her mother, but the mother never talked back. But that was exactly her mother's voice. So, what? What should I do? Marry the prince, the toad. Again, it was impossible to get it misunderstood. That was her mother's voice. And the third time, marry the prince, the toad. And so she decided to trust her mother, the voice, and she went back to the queen and she said, okay, I'll marry him, whatever. And they started planning for the wedding. They called the best sewers and they called the best musicians and the best cooks. Everything was ready, amazing. And the wedding was the following day. And Maria was like, I'm not so sure anymore. So she went again to her mother's grave and she asked, okay, I'm going to marry, but tomorrow after the wedding, we're going to be together in the same room. What am I supposed to do, mother? That's a toad. And her mother told her, don't worry. Just you have to wear under the wedding dress 7 skirts. And when you are alone in the room with the prince, you say, I'll take off a skirt if you take off a skin. And you'll see what happens. Okay. And so the day came and the big wedding happened. It was the most amazing wedding, and everyone ate and danced and cried and toasted. And the toad, well, the prince was okay, had a nice suit, even a bow tie, still a toad. And Maria was the most beautiful bride you can imagine. And the party was so beautiful, and Maria didn't want the party to end because it was so beautiful and everyone was dancing very nicely, but also because she was very scared about being in the room with the prince. But the time came, and they went into the bridal, the spouse's room. And the servants had poked some holes in the walls because they were very curious and they wanted to know. They were very noisy. They wanted to know what was going on. So the moment arrived, and Maria went like, okay, so I'll take off a skirt if you take off a skin. And off she went with the skirt, and the toad went off with the skin. And so she had a bit of more courage, and she was like, I'll take off a skirt if you take off a skin, and off a skirt and off a skin. I'll take off a skirt if you take off a skin, and off a skirt and off a skin for 7 times. And there she was, completely naked, and there he was, a beautiful, stunning man with all the parts that a man is supposed to have. And they were so happy, and they hugged skin to skin. It was amazing. And of course, the servants were peeking from outside. They saw all the scene and were like, oh my God, we have to tell the queen. And so they went and called the queen. And the 2 spouses, happy and tired, they just fell asleep on the bed. And the queen looked inside. He saw that his son, the toad, was a beautiful prince, and had an idea. She entered very slowly, opened the door. She took all the skins of the toad and she burned them. Well, the following day, when the prince and the princess woke up, the prince saw that the skins were not there. It told the princess, I don't know what happened. Someone burned them. Maybe they thought they were doing something good, but this made my curse even worse. Now I have to go away. I'm sorry, I have to leave you. There's only one chance to save me. Every time a stranger, a foreigner, a wanderer is coming through your door, is knocking at your door, just help him. And then before they go away, ask them if they've seen something strange, because that might be me. And off he went. And many years passed. 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. And every time someone was knocking at their door, the Princess Maria was welcoming them, was feeding them, was hosting them, and then was asking, have you seen something strange? But no one had ever seen nothing. Till one day on the 7th year, a man, an old man, dirty, ragged, arrived, knocked at her door. She helped him, she fed him, she hosted him, and then off he went. But while he was just leaving out of the door, she remembered, she grabbed his arm and asked, so, have you seen something strange coming here? Oh, well, I've been a wanderer for years and years. I have seen many strange things. But the other night, I saw the weirdest thing of all. Because I was coming here, and under a cliff, I saw a big toad with 7 little toads. And at some point, it just took out a cake, cut it into 9 parts, and said, one part is for me, one part is for each of you, and one is for Maria, if she were here. Oh, that's my prince! It's my toad prince! Would you be able to bring me back there? I promise you, oh, you can stay here in the rain, everything you want. Yes, of course, let's go. And so they set off, and they went the cliff to the place where the wanderer had sought some repair. And they waited till the sun went down, and then they saw this toad followed by 7 little toads arriving there. They hid, and the toad took out a cake, cut it into 9 parts, and said, "One is for me, one is for each of you, and one is for Maria, if she were here." "But here I am," said Maria, and she came out of the hiding place. And the toad immediately turned again back into the beautiful prince. And the little toads, they disappeared. But someone told me that the 2 of them lived very happily in the castle for a very long time, and they had 7 children.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you very much. Now, you say you're from Italy. So how many So how many languages do you speak?
I speak, well, so well only English, but I speak also German and Spanish.
Wow. Well, that's worth a round of applause for starters. Well done. Well done.
Very much.
I think it's a very brave and good thing to tell a story in a second language. And your English is very good. Your diction, it's the clarity of the words is excellent.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I think we understood the story completely. You are very fluent is the word that I would use. I thought that the way that you did the story in a second language. Now I speak French and a bit of Welsh. And it's a very difficult thing to do. So well done. I'd like to say thank you very much. Well done.
Thank you so much.
Well done. Okay. Well, I was going to go to the United States of America, to Washington, D.C. So what's the temperature there today?
Today, I think we're in the 70s, maybe the 80s. It's a cooling off. It's been, our weather is like Congress. You never know what to expect. First, my heart's prayers and thoughts go out to all of you in the United Kingdom, because I know your beloved queen has transitioned, and I send my heart's prayers and thoughts.
Well, it's very nice of you, Barbara, but you must add the realms and the kingdoms and the Commonwealth countries from across the globe. It's not just us.
I'm an American. I was doing my best.
Well, you've just got to remember that the world is split into 3. What is ours, what was ours, and what should have been ours. Okay?
We're going to have a discussion about that later, but not today. Valentina, and in the realm of theater, they say never follow children or animal acts. Now I have to say never follow children, animal acts, or Valentina.
Yeah.
Your story was most touching, and it's a great story. Colin, I meant what I wrote in the chat. Your song really touched me, and it opened a floodgate of memories. I had a cousin who I guess we would call her a folk singer. She was a beatnik folk singer, hippie, but anyhow, she played the guitar, and there were times when there would not be a dry eye in the room after she finished playing. And your song touched me, and I just wanted to share that with you. All right, after I've done all that. So I'm sharing a story from one of the tribes in Sierra Leone, but I have to make a couple of adjustments, because in the rendition of the story I learned, they used the word mammy, and for various reasons, I cannot use the word mammy. Okay, even though I know it means mother, so I'm gonna use mama or mother. Mama from the Swahili, or mother. There are a couple of words in here. Lili, which means little, and Goro, which means girl. And this is from the Timni tribe of Sierra Leone. All right, and I'm going to have to do it in my traditional manner. A long time ago is when this story was first told. Now, this story takes place during the time in the beginning when the earth was set down and the sky was set high. But not everything was finished. This story takes place during a time when animals could talk, but many of them did not resemble the animals we know today. As they were gathered around a fire, a terrible rain set in, and the rain was so heavy. No, it wasn't raining cats and dogs, that came later. The rain was so heavy that it put out the fire. And during the course of the night, it could come early in the morning, they gathered together shivering and cold, for they had no fire. So the lion, who even then was king, he looked and he said, "Antelope." And the antelope said, "Yes, sire." And the king pointed off to the distance where there was smoke coming up. And as you know, they say where there's smoke, there is fire. And there was smoke coming up from a house on a hill nearby. He said, "Go to that hill and fetch us some fire." And the antelope took off to fetch some fire. When the antelope arrived at the house on the hill nearby, there was a lady sitting in front of the house. And he said, "Mother, Mama, I've come to fetch fire, if you would please." And she said, "I begrudge no one for the gift of fire. However, here I have one law. If you wish to have the fire, you must fight my child and you must defeat her." The antelope said, you want me to fight a child? You want me to kill a child?" She said, "No, you must fight my child." "Well, we need the fire. I'll do what I must." And so the mother pointed to Lily Goro, the little girl. "You want me to fight a little girl? You must fight my child and defeat her if you wish to have the fire. The fighting place is in the sand behind the house." And so the antelope went to the fighting place, which was the sand behind the house. Didn't I just say that? And he charged the little girl. But just before they began to battle, the mother sang a song. I like you guys, so I won't sing. I'll just do it as a rhyme. And she said, "Goro, Lily Goro, fight him, Lily Goro, heave him high into the sky so he won't come back till tomorrow." And imbued with the power from the magic song, Lily Goro grabbed the antelope and threw him high in the air. He threw it high, 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 high. And when he came down, bam! He came down mouth first into the sand, got a mouthful of sand, and started coughing. And to this day, antelopes cough. And the antelope went back to the others without the fire. Oh, and they were disappointed, and they were cold and wet. The king of the jungle said, "This will not do, this will not do, this will not do, this will not do." And the leopard said, "I will fetch the fire." And so the leopard went to the house on the hill nearby. He said, "Mother, I've come for fire." She says, "As I said before, I begrudge no one the gift of fire, but if you want the fire, you must defeat my child." And Lily Goro, the little girl, stepped forward. "The fighting place is in the sand behind the house. You want me to fight that little girl? If you want the fire, you must defeat her." And once again, Mama sang the song, "Goro, Lily Goro, fight him. Lily Goro, heave him high in the sky so he won't come back until tomorrow." And they went in the back and they began to tussle. And Lily Goro grabbed the leopard and threw him up in the air. He came down so hard that when he fell, oh, he got a nosebleed and his mouth was all bloody and the blood spilled all over his beautiful coat. And to this day, the leopard is spotted. And he went back. And the animals once again were disappointed because there was to be no fire. The elephant said, I will defeat this little girl, for I am the elephant, and I am the epitome of power. I will defeat her so badly, she'll wish she had never been born. And to prove his point about how strong he was, he wrapped his mighty trunk around a mighty tree, and he pulled and he pulled and he pulled until he pulled it up by its roots and discarded it. And so the elephant thundered off to defeat Liligoro. And when he got there, he saw the little girl, but he kept his resolve. He was going to defeat this little girl. And Mama sang once again, Goro, Liligoro, fight him. Liligoro, heave him high into the sky so he won't come back until tomorrow. And the elephant charged, and imbued with the power from the magic of those words of her mother's song, she grabbed him by the trunk, she twirled him this way and that way and that way and this way, and she twirled him around and she threw him high into the sky, higher than the highest mountaintops. And when he fell back, he fell on his two front teeth, and injured them. His teeth swole and grew long, swole and grew longer. They swole and grew longer and longer and longer. And to this day, the elephant has two long tusks exuding from his mouth. But with his head tucked and his trunk low, he returned to the Kijiji, to the village, without fire. By now, the other animals were getting agitated. They wanted warmth. They wanted to get rid of this wetness. And so the spider stepped forward and said, I'm going to go there. I'll defeat the little girl and I'll bring you back the fire. And the king looked, yeah, right. Okay, you do that. And so the spider went off. Once again, the mother set the terms. He said, no problem. I'm going to defeat her. I may not be big, but I'm nimble. I'm crafty. I will outwit her. Goro, Goro, Lili Goro, fight him, Lili Goro, heave him high in the sky so he won't come back until tomorrow. And the spider charged. He was trying to spin a web, but Lili was a little bit too good for him. And she grabbed him and she bam, 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 and slammed him down on the ground. And when he landed, his feet and his hands split into two each. No longer did he have hands and feet, but he had 8 legs. But his legs were not strong, they were very weak, which is why to this day, spider must crawl from place to place. Oh, the animals were distraught. What were they going to do? The strongest, the quickest, the cunningest, they had all been defeated by a little girl, No offense to the ladies. Don't hurt me. I'm just telling you the story. So finally, the conch snail said, I'm going to go get us some fire. And the lion, and the lion took his paws and went shoom on the back of the shell of the conch. And he marred it and scarred it, which is why to this day, conch shells are marred and scarred. He said, you are going to bring back the fire. He said, yes, I'm going to bring back the fire. Now, back during those days, a snail was not so slow. He wasn't that fast, but he wasn't that slow. So the conch snail set off. He went to the hill nearby, and he said and when he got there, he looked left, he looked right, he went around to the back, and snails kind of glide on the slime that he produced. And he got to the sand and he went this way, he went that way, he went that way, he went that way, and everywhere he went, he left a thin, slimy coat of slime. Then he went back around the house and he said, Mama, I've come for the fire. She looked at the conch shell and she didn't even bother to sing the song this time. You must defeat my daughter. Beat her and you can have the fire. The fighting place is in the sand behind the house. And so the conch snail went and he placed himself in the center of the fighting place. Liligoro stepped forward and slipped. She got up and slipped again. She got up and tried to move toward the conch snail and she slipped. And when she slipped the fourth time, the conch snail grabbed her and twirled her around and around and around and around and around. And, well, you get it. And around and threw her so high in the air, she became a small little dot. And she kept on going. And Mother was distraught because her little girl was so high in the sky, she couldn't see her. Tears began to roll down her eyes. And she gave fire to the conch snail. And she cried, and she cried. And this is the reason why people cry to this day. And she cried, and she cried. And the conch snail took back the fire. Oh, and everyone rejoiced. Everyone could get warm. They get their fur and their hair and everything dry, and they could cook meat, and they began. And this is the part that gets me. They're animals and they're cooking meat, but anyhow, they're cooking, they're eating, they're enjoying themselves. And the mother is just crying and crying and crying. And finally, her daughter came back. Boom! Shaka-laka, laka, laka, laka. And she was so happy, she grabbed her daughter, and her daughter grabbed her, and they hugged, and they hugged, and they cried, and they hugged, and they hugged, and the crying stopped. The crying stopped. And this is why, even though people cry, to this day, hugs have the power to make crying go away. People cry, and they find solace in the arms of each other, and the crying stops. There's much power in a hug. Hug somebody today. You just might make their day or chase their tears away. Asante.
Oh, Baba, that was lovely. Thank you very much, mate. That's really, really good of you. Right.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go to Janet next, but we're starting over here in England. Now, I live on the Welsh Marsh, which is, if you think of the United Kingdom, there's Wales there, and I'm just halfway up on the English side. That's where we are. And we have a storytelling club. And we've had a storytelling club here for 30 odd years. Then we had the pandemic. And so we're going to get started again next month. So we're doing the first Monday of the month, and it's live in the Pottery in Much We're Not. We're going to be able to sit down and touch people and drink beer and stuff like that. Now I'm going to put it out. I know you're from miles away, from all over the globe and everything else, but I'm just going to put, you'll see it with a bit of luck, you'll see the advertising. It's October the 10th, November the 14th and December the 12th. And if you happen to be in this part of the world at all, you'd be very, very welcome to come. You really, really would. Now I'm going to go to Janet, who is our closest person here. And she's part of the festival team that we have here and everything else. So Janet from Staffordshire.
Hello, everybody. Can you all hear me? Yes?
Yeah.
Good.
Mm.
Well, I have not met the Queen. I have not been in touch with her exactly. When my parents had their 70th and then 75th wedding anniversary, she sent them cards, which was very nice. And when my father had his 100th birthday, the card came and I dressed up as a queen with a queen's mask to give it to him. And it was great fun. And I don't really fancy being a queen. It was a little bit restricting, shall we say. However, today I went to listen to a proclamation. Now, I've never really thought about proclamations. We say it in stories, don't we? The king sent out a proclamation. So today I was standing with a group of people in my village, and there was the proclamation that Charles is going to be king. And I stood there thinking, goodness, I am witnessing a proclamation. So every time I tell a story now, I shall know what a proclamation feels like. It was quite, well, I don't really know what it felt like, except I just kept thinking, this is a proclamation. Nobody was wearing robes. Nobody had a great trumpet. But what was said was very important, that we now have a new king, or a king, after 70 plus years of a queen. I don't know if it will make a difference, but it set me thinking. I was going to tell a different story, but I thought, just set me thinking about what happened when we got the new queen. Now, I was about 7, and we'd got a queen. We haven't had a queen for ages. And there's going to be celebrations. And I remember being very excited about it. Now, that was 1953. I want to move you on about 20 years. And I was working. I was running the libraries in Northwest Leicestershire. And it was my day to work. We worked quite long hours. If we started at 9, we worked through till 9. I was quite tired. It was about 5 o'clock. A little boy came in and he said to me, "Miss, I've got a school project to do." And I looked at him and thought, well, we'll help you out there. It's about Queen Elizabeth. "Oh, fine," I said. Now, every librarian knows you don't just take things for granted. You ask questions to find out what they really want. Like a doctor asks you questions to find out what's really wrong with you. But I didn't do that. I went straight to the shelves and said, "What is it you want?" "I want books on Queen Elizabeth." I searched and I found a great pile of books on Queen Elizabeth. And I put them down on the table in front of him, and he looked up and he said, "No, not that Queen Elizabeth. That's Queen Elizabeth I. I want to do a project on Queen Elizabeth II. And I said, "Oh, right, very well." So I went back to the shelves. "Do you think I could find a book on Queen Elizabeth II? Not a one, nothing." And his eyes sort of widened, and I thought, this little lad's going to cry. He looked so distressed that he wasn't going to be able to get material for his school project. And he began to stammer and stutter and say, "It's my history project and it's got to be good and it's about Queen Elizabeth II." And words just went into mumbles. And I felt so sorry for the lad. And I said, "Look, it's getting late. Sit down and I'll talk to you about Queen Elizabeth. Is there any thing you want to know?" And he said, "Yes, I want to know about the coronation." I said, "Oh, well, I can tell you about the coronation because I think I was about 7 when she was crowned." And he sat down and I racked my brains. And the first thing that came to me was television. We didn't have a television. Only one person in our end of the village had a television. It was about that big, the screen, and it stood on a big brown column. It was like a big square eye peeping out at you. And so we had to go to this room to watch the television. There were about, I don't know, a dozen, no many more, 2 dozen, even more people sitting around. And being only 7, I was told, sit on the floor. And I looked up and it was raining on the screen. It was probably raining outside, but we were in the house. I looked up at the screen and it was all fuzzy. But we saw the coronation on the television. I'd never seen a coronation and I'd never seen a television. And it was wonderful. And then she brought out tea in real china cups. And I was terrified. It was in a saucer like this. And I, at 7, was supposed to drink this tea in the china cup. And I was just like this. And my sister was sitting to one side and she just went like that. You know what sisters are like. I managed it. And I had the presence of mind to let the teaspoon slide onto the floor, put the saucer down beside me, and I held it like this. And I did not drop that cup or spill a drop. Now, these are the kind of memories I was telling this little boy, because I got carried away. And he said, "You've never seen television?" I said, no, I'd never seen television before. And I'd never had a real china cup before. He just stared at me and he said, "What else?" And I thought, well, what do I tell him next? So I told him about the street party. And then I said, and we had ice cream and jelly. And he just went, "Oh, why did you get excited about that?" I said, "Because of the rationing." And he just looked at me and said, "What is rationing?" I said, "Well, during the war, when we couldn't get certain foods, we had to just have tokens, vouchers for food. And sugar was one of the last things to come off ration. And ice cream and jelly made of sugar, they were treats." And I wrote it down. He thought that was amazing. I thought, oh, giving a lot away here, but never mind, carry on. So we carried on. And I said, well, it was raining, and it was raining after the street party. He seemed to know what a street party was. And I said, then we had a fancy dress parade. I knew what that was. And I explained that my sister and I had gone dressed as nurses with capes and aprons and hats. He looked a bit quizzical, but he didn't seem to be interested in that. And I said, "The television one?" And he said, "What?" And of course, it was the person who was dressed up in fancy dress as a television, because nobody had televisions. So it was very much the thing to be a fancy dress television. And then I said, oh, going back to the rationing, that reminds me of the time that I stole the raisins from school. And I said, raisins? School? Well, yes, because at school, you used to make these scones to go with the milk that you got. But they still had milk in those days. And he said, "You have made biscuits for yourself at school?" Yes, we did. But we had to go and wash the raisins. Now that flummoxed him, because raisins, as far as he was concerned, came in packets. I said, no, they came in brown bags and you had to wash them. And I was sent to wash them. And, well, because there was rationing and we didn't really have sweets, there were fewer raisins when I got back to the classroom, a lot fewer than when I left. And I got into trouble for that. Well, all this, he wrote down all sorts of bits and pieces. And when I told him about coming out of the fancy dress, see, I'm all muddled up because this is the way I was telling him. It was just like memories pouring out. I got dressed in a pretty dress and I put on my bolero. Bolero, he didn't know what a bolero was. I had to explain. It was a short-sleeved, short cardigan, and it was made of Angora, and it came from Canada. And he looked at me, he said, "You go shopping in Canada?" Said, no. This was after the war, and it was quite difficult to get pretty items. And we had an uncle who had emigrated to Canada in the 1930s, and he'd done very well for himself, and he'd sent us clothes. Well, he was writing this down as if it was strange. It wasn't strange to me. And so I continued to tell him this. And we must have been talking for about an hour and a half. And eventually it was beginning to get a little bit dark outside. And I said, I think we really need to go home. And he, yes, I'll go home now. And he just looked at me and said, thank you. I've learnt a lot of history. And I was very smug. I thought, well, I've helped this little lad, you know. And then he turned to me and he really made me feel about that big. And he said, how can an old person like you remember all those things so well? So I showed him the door. And later on, he did come back and say that his teacher thought that he'd done very well in his history project. So I forgave him.
Thank you very much, Janet. That's great. Thank you very much at all. Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to Norman and then we're going to Despina. Now, the World Storytelling Cafe, I haven't got a name for you, sir, and I've been struggling to remember your first name, and I should know it, and I don't, and I'm sorry.
Hello, I'm so glad to be with you again. Okay, so for my name is Kamal. Yeah,
Kamal.
Yes, Kamal. Like Baba. Yeah, B-A-B.
Yeah,
Hello.
I do apologise, Kamal. We have met before. I know you have. Are you going to do a story before we leave tonight? Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, of
okay,
course, yeah.
So,
Later, maybe later.
Brilliant, absolutely. So I'm going to go Norman, Despina, Kamal, and I think that's everybody done. But we'll see. So Norman, you can do one, my friend from Canada?
Yes, I think I can. This is reminded of it. It's funny now. I've sat on both sides of this screen, so to speak, both here in Canada and Britain. I don't think I appeared here though, but I did attend from Holland and some other places. So, by the way, I'm reminded of just before I left on the trip, I made a trip to a bookstore that dealt in antique books and ephemera. And what I had in my hand was a bag full of, well, one was a ticket to the coronation of Her Majesty Elizabeth II in 1952. And it had the ticket for this and the seat number for the stands of the people going by. And I didn't think that it would be so significant so soon. He gave it to me. I gave it to him. And it was quite the thing. But it was like I was holding a time machine in my hand. To if I just hurried really quickly, I'd be able to be there just in time for to sit in my seat. But I had booklets on the Queen Elizabeth and about her, a little history of her and her family and everything like that, going back a generation or two. So now I wish I kind of kept it. But you mentioned that you like how things came to be. And I think, my apologies if you've heard this story before. Long time ago, when the world had just been born, the shaper and the maker of things was walking through the forest and noticed that it was very quiet. The animals do not have their voices yet. Oh, I was planning on doing that sometime. And so the shaper reached up into the sky and took the roar of the winds and reached down into the ocean and the waters, took the murmur and bubbles of the water and mixed the sounds of wind and water together to make voices, enough for all of the creatures of the world. And when that was done, they were put into a huge bag and taken to the edge of the great green forest. And then the shaper cried out, "Oh, you creatures of the world, come to the edge of the great green forest, and there you shall receive your voices, your own true voices." And the shaper's voice rolled around the world. Every living creature heard, but they couldn't say anything about it. Not yet, anyways. When they were all gathered around that bag and they could hear there's hoots and howls, there's screeches and yowls, and twitters and twangs and hootings. Wow, each one wondered what its voice, its own true voice, would sound like. And so the Shaper called out once again, "Today you shall receive your voices, your own true voices. And while you may choose your voices during this day, while the sun is in the sky. And if you do not like the voice you receive at first, why, you may trade it for another. But once the sun sets, you'll keep your voice, your own true voice, forever. So you must choose carefully." Well, the first animal to run ahead and jump right into the bag was the dog. You know what dogs are like. Rah, 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 in. Dog took a voice, jumped out, put it on, took a deep breath, and the dog went quack, 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 quack. Didn't feel right to the dog. And so the dog took the voice off, put it into the bag, and this time the dog sniffed, because dog finds things by sniffing. Sniff, sniff, sniff. No, sniff, sniff, sniff. No, that sounds like skunk. Ah, the dog took that voice, put it on, took a deep breath, and this time the dog went, woof, woof, woof. "That's my voice," said the dog, "my own true voice," and went into the forest to play. So animal after animal received their voices, and the forest began to fill with hoots and howls and screeches and yowls, and the birds flew into the bag silent and flew out singing, and the forest began to fill with the sounds of the birds as well. Until at last, there's only 2 animals left and 2 voices in the bag, Lion and Mouse. Lion looked into the bag and saw a great growly voice and reached down and took it. And Mouse saw that voice and thought, I want that voice. And so Mouse ran between Lion's legs, leaped up into the air, and took Lion's voice right from between his great paws. Whoever said a mouse lacked courage? And Mouse ran into the forest with Lion's voice. And Lion got the only voice that was left. "Make that mouse give back my voice," squeaked the Lion. "Oh, I can't do that," said the Shaper. "Mouse may have stolen your voice, but I can't take it from Mouse. Mouse will have to give it to you. And Mouse must do it before the sun sets, remember." "If that mouse does not give me back my voice," said the Lion, "I will kill the mouse." "Ah," said the Shaper, "you can't do that either, because if you kill the mouse, your voice will die with the mouse, and it will die forever. You must use your brains and not your strength." Poor Lion, he wasn't used to using his brains. But he ran into the forest crying out, "Mouse, Mouse, give me back my voice, please, please, Mouse." But Mouse was hiding underneath a bush and watched the Lion disappear deep into the forest and crept out from under the bush when the Lion was gone. The little mouse took a deep, 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 deep breath and went, "Roar!" And all the leaves fell off the tree. That was fun. Mouse ran around roaring, and all the leaves from the trees were falling onto the ground. And that's why the leaves fell off the tree, because Mouse frightened them so long ago. Well, Mouse got tired of this. And so Mouse went into the forest and found Elephant. "Aha," said Mouse. "I'm going to give Elephant a surprise of his life." And went up on his great leg, up onto his broad shoulder, up behind his tiny little ears. We see in those days, Elephant has a tiny little ears and a very, very short nose. Elephant was embarrassed by that nose. But little Mouse took a deep, deep, deep breath and went, "Roar!" And Elephant's ears shot out into umbrellas. His nose shot out 10 feet long. And the elephant went trumpeting into the forest. And to this day, elephants have long noses, great ears, and they're extremely afraid of mice. Well, roaring is hot and thirsty work. And Mouse started to creep towards the pool where all the animals went to drink, and was just about to jump into the pool of water when suddenly a voice behind Mouse, coming from behind a big bush, said, "Hey, Mouse, you better be careful, Mouse. If you get your voice wet before the sun sets, your voice will shrink down to a squeak." "Oh, who's that?" asked Mouse. "It's a friend," said the voice behind that very, very large bush. "Well, thank you, my friend. Thank you for the warning." And Mouse took Lion's voice off and hung it upon that bush where it gleamed red and gold and yellow in the rays of the setting sun, and jumped into the water, was swimming around, enjoying itself so much that Mouse did not see a great paw reach up from behind the bush, take the voice, and put another voice in place. Suddenly the voice cried out, "Mouse, Mouse, look! The sun is about to disappear. Get your voice, or you will be silent forever." And indeed, the sun was about to disappear. Mouse swam to the shore, ran up to the bush, grabbed the voice that was there, and put it on. And the sun had set. Now all the animals of the world would keep their voices forever. Mouse went around the bush to see who his friend was, but no one was there, so Mouse kept on going and found Giraffe. And there Mouse thought, "Aha! I wonder what Giraffe will look like, with a nose as long as his neck." And Mouse went up, 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 up. Let's make this a shorter story. Up, up, up his long neck, and behind his great ears. Little Mouse took a deep, deep, deep breath, and right into Giraffe's ear went squeak, 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 squeak. When Giraffe heard that squeak right in his ears, he shook his head, and Little Mouse whipped through the air, flying over the trees, his tail whirling around, his whiskers whistling in the wind, and landed splash in the pool of water. And down into the darkness Mouse went. Mouse would have drowned. Mouse would have died. But a great golden paw reached down into the darkness and lifted Mouse up onto warm, dry earth. And who do you think it was? "Oh, Lion," said Mouse. "Oh, Lion, thank you for saving my life. Oh, Lion, my voice is nothing but a squeak." "Oh, that's too bad," said Lion. "You must have gotten your voice wet somehow." And it shrank. Well, I kept my voice dry, and I have a wonderful voice. And Lion let out a great roar, and the elephant trumpeted, the giraffe ran into the grasslands, and the little mouse, hearing that roar for the first time, ran into the shadows, and it's been hiding in the shadows ever since, afraid of lions or anything that even looks like a lion. And so to this day, Lion has Lion's true voice, Mouse has Mouse's true voice, and may each one of us find our own true voices as the animals did long time ago.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much, Norman. That was really cool. That's really, really nice. Right.
That's an original story.
Oh, cool. Okay. I might be telling that just now. Huh. Right, Despina, we're going to go all the way to the Greek islands. Are the Greek islands or the Greek mainland? It's the Greek islands.
Yeah, an island.
Yeah.
So, to be honest, Mike, I had not prepared a Queen story for tonight.
I wasn't trying to do a theme of Queen stories. So just do whatever you're comfortable with. Don't worry about it. Absolutely
Right.
not.
Look, there is kind of a coincidence here because it's a story that comes from my father, and he must have been 2 or 3 years younger than the Queen. They were almost born at the same time, almost.
The Queen was 96 when she died.
Yeah, well, I lost Dad back in 2009. He didn't get to live that long, but still, they were born around the same time, yeah?
Yeah.
So, back then, as Janet very well described the era, well, it was hard times. And my father, he had been raised in another island, in a village, in a very strict and conservative environment, very religious people, hardworking in the fields and such. So there was only one escape for people who did not want to live, work in the land, and that was the sea. luckily, he had a vocation, a drawing towards the sea. So he really, really liked it. He enjoyed it. He found different ways to be in it, on it, working at it, etc. So I can still remember that when he was not on board, traveling the world, he would be fishing. That was his hobby. So he was always somehow around the sea. So one day he told us this story that he must have been in his early 20s, must have been around the time of the coronation of the Queen, about the same time. So he was still a newbie in the ships, and he was working as an engineer, a mechanic. So as he was new to the job, he had not learned the ropes yet. He would get to do the night shifts. Now, they were traveling somewhere around the world in some ocean far away from home, and all maintenance work and work around the engines could be done during the day. So the night shifts were really long and boring. So one night, when he was at the engine room with all the machinery and all the gears and the different kinds of machines around him, looking for ways to pass the time, he felt being stared at. Sometimes, you know, you get this feeling when it's not in your vision, within your vision, but you can really feel like you have eyes on your back. So he turned around to see who it was that was staring at him. And at the other side of the engine room, out of the shadows, came a rat. Now, we have just been told by Norman that mice tend to live in the shadows and go hiding places and scurry off when they see some elephant or human approach. Now this rat, this one, he stood on his hind legs and he was eyeing the man, measuring him as the man was staring back. The rats are hideous to look at. They're not pretty creatures. They have eyes like burning coal and they have these long yellow teeth and they're kind of scary. But this rat, this one, he was living in the engine room. He must have dropped in some machine oil or something and he was scorched. He had patches of fur missing from his body. He was really ugly. Now, let's freeze time for a minute and leave the man and the rat stare at each other. And let me give you some background on Argyris, my father. You see, Argyris had been raised in this kind of very conservative environment, hardworking people, farmers, and animals were only used in the fields, or they were kept for farming, obviously, for meat and for milk, etc. But somehow Argyris' heart was soft. He had a soft spot for animals. And I have different memories throughout our life together. I remember when I was a teenage girl and I had found a little bird that could not yet fly. It had fallen off its nest and I had brought it home. It was a sparrow. And we had, all the family, we had adopted the sparrow so until it would grow older so we could set it free. And while we had the sparrow inside the house, we did not keep it in a cage because we wanted its feathers to grow stronger. So we would let it fly around the house. So the sparrow would nest on my father's white hair and just pick them with his little beak, you know, make himself comfortable around the top of the head of my father, inside his hair. And this is how we would have dinner as a family. Or later on, when I became a university student and I found a stray puppy, and of course I brought it home, as we always did, me and my two sisters. We brought several pets home. So this one became our dog, obviously, and then she gave birth and we kept a puppy. We gave the others to adoption, and we had our dog and her son together growing up. So they became, we had them neutered, of course. They became my father's pets. He would go around and take them everywhere with him, always refusing to use a leash. He would always have them unleashed, free at his side, and they would always follow. So that was my father's heart with animals. Now, you have this background information about Argyris. You know what kind of a fellow he was, but the rat, he had no clue what was coming. So when the man tossed something towards the rat, he remained there eyeing the man. He never lost his gaze, never lost his stare, but the thing that had been tossed in mid-distance between the man and the rat was giving away a strong odor which had the rat's whiskers flickering. So very hesitantly, very cautiously, he approached the piece of cheese that turned out to be the thing, quickly grabbed it and scurried back to wherever he had come from. That was the first night. The second night, well, of course, he came back for some more. Now, night after night, you would have the man sharing his food with the rat. The ugly, you did not want to look at that rat, it was hideous, but it had become the man's pet. Until eventually, the man had that wild thing eat off his hand. So time passed. Argyris did not talk with anybody on board about his pet because, you know, he was an ambitious man. He was a newbie then, but he intended to become first engineer, second only to the captain. So you had to have the men's respect. Men would need to follow your orders. On the boats, you could have a parrot or a bird that would repeat the words that people said. So, you know, sailors would have fun. Some people sometimes brought monkeys, and the monkeys would steal things from the cabins, and then they would go around the boat looking for the stolen property to take it back, and it was entertainment. This relationship that had been created and grown between the man and the rat, this thing he could not share with the other seamen. Alas, one night, Argyris got sick. He had to be confined in his cabin, and back then things were rough. There were hardly any antibiotics. There was no doctor on board, so they just kept the people with maybe an aspirin if they had any, and tea inside their rooms until they got better. You know. So this is what happened. Argyris grew a high temperature and he was confined in his cabin. The crew would help, of course, but you had to wait until it was over. So several nights passed. He got better, and when he did, he returned to the night shifts. And he waited. He waited for the rat. But the rat did not return. Not on the first night, not on the second. He had to ask. So he did find the man that had been replacing him on the night shifts. All this time he was ill. And he asked him if he had seen a rat in the engine room. And the other guy, he said, well, yeah, you wouldn't believe his nerve. He must have been a male because he was so huge and he was ugly and he was corpse, but don't you worry, I have taken care of him. Surely he must be floating somewhere in the ocean by now. Now that never said, I can imagine him hiding his pain, maybe crying alone in his cabin. but I know that he never forgot, because many years later, I was a teen, so it must have been around the Silver Jubilee. Around that time, one night, all the family, we were gathered around the stove on a winter night, and he shared with us the rat story. Thank you.
Oh, that was lovely, Tismina. Thanks very much. Right. Camille, I know. Okay, we're coming to you last, but very much not least, as we say over here. And you're sat in the Storytelling Club in Marrakesh, yeah?
Okay.
Yeah, brilliant.
Hello, everyone. Hello, storytellers. So I would love to start with, like I said, the current, the daily events. I mean, the world, like I said, has lost, like I said, an iconic person, a charismatic person. Like I said, Majesty Elizabeth was such a group of leaders. I mean, those people who unleashed and made the world be free, such as Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, and Martin Luther King, and the list is wide. One, like I say, we add another person who is Majesty Elizabeth. So I have newly known many information about, like I say, Elizabeth's life, Majesty, and she was a big fan of Ghana's Arsenal. She loved this team. Also, there is another team which is Millwall, and she was always loving cats and pigs. And they know, I can say a story. There is a player from Cameroon. He, I can say, was playing an Arsenal team, and that time Elizabeth was, I can say, give them all the players, football players, trophies, etc. And there is a football player. He was African, Ibui, from Ivory Coast. He, I can say, discussed something beautiful with Majesty Elizabeth when he saw that the whole palace, like I say, there were cats, and he informed Elizabeth to work, like I say, in the palace only to catch them, to feed, like I say, your cats. I mean, the conversation between Ibu. So in general, we are talking about stories. In life, there are many stories, and Elizabeth Queen was the real and genuine meaning of the queens are in this universe, in this world. I always said just before, I can say, and I always still remember, there is a sentence I will always, I can say, repeatedly in bottomly inside my life. I say, always, always I see this woman, this abnormal woman in this planet, I feel like I'm peaceful. She's one of the, I can say, makers of peace, or I can say peaceful. Yeah. So from another vision, my story of today is, I can say, I believe that I love the school of to write, or simply, but inside your, I can say, inside you, you can embody and you can reincarnate many things. I mean, innovation, how to innovate your inner beauty, also your inner, I can say, cultural, I mean, your back garden. All of us having a back garden, and all of us having something beautiful. I'm a big fan of poetry, but a poetry can be a storyteller, because there is a common factor, which is art. So my story is about poverty. I don't know, Mr. Babasi, if you have, I can say, a story, or if you possess many stories of, I mean, this thematic issues, poverty. In our, I can say, cultural country, we have several I can say, many stories and several stories that I can say talked around or spinning around poverty. So Juha and Mr. Juha is one of those people, okay, say, who reach it. So my story is about a person. This story is about a 30 year before now, before this time I'm talking, I'm discussing, I'm sharing, interacting with you. It's about a 30 years of passing many days and hours and moments and events and stories, many stories inside a lot of stories, because there are many people and still many people. So this person was named by Yusuf. He is from, I can say, Casablanca, is, I can say, in Morocco. He was, I can say, he was stiffening up from poverty and from, I can say, his dark was. And he was living with his family, I can say, in shanty towns, and he suffered more. He stopped his studies and went directly to the street. And we know when you meet, like I say, homeless, or I can say some people, I mean, they live a cruel life. You suffer more and more in life. So all this experience, Yusuf, I can say, faced and tried always to defeat poverty and to, I can say, to realize his dream was what? Was photography. Once upon a time, and that time, Yusuf was, I can say, was his first time to, I can say, to go to the cinema to see, I can say, Martin Scorsese's movies. And he was inspired and attached by, I can say, the seventh art, I mean, cinema arts, like writing stories or novels, or, yeah, I think all beautiful souls, artistic souls. And Yusuf was always thinking about, his dream was about how to buy the first camera. His first camera was a simple one, but the love and the passion, I mean, Yusuf was, I can say, passionate about, and was patient and passionate about achieving his dream that time. And after that, he went to work in many works, and life still, okay, cruel to Yusuf. After that, there is, I can say, a coincidence, and we say is the change of the story. I mean, when he lost his mom, she passed away, and he, that time, he, I can say, changed utterly. Despite this coincidence, or that period was about what? Is Yusuf, I can say, had like 14 years. It's like being, we say, not ripened. He was unripened, and he was not immature, and do you know, life streets was, I can say, affecting negatively. That's why he, I can say, went to, he became addicted to drugs, and yeah, until, I can say, until one day he decided to, I can say, to apply to, I can say, a journalism office, and such a photographer, and they accepted Yusuf to, I can say, to start internship with them, and that's what occurred. And Yusuf astonished, I can say, the editor and the director, because he took a picture to Casablanca. I mean, the old Anfa Casablanca. The old name of Casablanca was Anfa. So after that, they accepted him to work, to start working with them, and still like that. The question is, after 14, what you can say about Yusuf's life? Is it, or I can say, was it changing for worse, for best, for the best, or for bad, or for what? This is the beautiful part of this story. I mean, Yusuf became famous worldwide. Everyone, like I say, newspapers, everyone was looking for seeing a contract with this famous Casablancan Moroccan photographer that time. That led some French newspapers to, I can say, to invite him to a ceremony of, it was a New Year's ceremony. And that's what happened. Yusuf had that time many relationships with, I can say, global famous YouTubers, bloggers, etc. Because Yusuf that time was, we say, related, not the person, we say, who was that time loving, I can say, social media. No, his only entertainment and hobby was photographing, because he had, I can say, a beautiful view towards this universe and towards this life. That's what's happened, and this celebrity and this fame enabled Yusuf to become pioneer photographer, one of the I say best, because to create a poor person from poverty to, I can say, to wealth is hard, totally hard. But to, I can say, to born like a rich man, and this is a huge difference. That's happened. Conference, fame came, everything came, and Yusuf today became, and still until now, Ocean. They only name it by Ocean. Ocean gave us, or I can say, gave that time, especially to people who live in Casablanca, because Casablanca was like a giant, like a massive capital. I mean, I can say politic capitalization. That's why people there were slums, were shanty towns. Casablanca is a merge, is a connections between, I can say, different cultures in Morocco. I think is the well populated in Morocco. This city interacted the attention and the beauty and the how to be successful. I would say that, I mean, life of Yusuf. Life with Yusuf was hard, but it changed. The main wisdom we can get from this story, I mean, Yusuf Ocean's story, is how to combat your, I can say, your failure. When we talk about poverty, it's not a shame. Sometimes I feel, when I see Elizabeth Queen Majesty, I feel like the world is in a peaceful period and manner. When I still remember this story, I feel that there is, despite all obstacles, we can live, we can jump, we can fail, we can feel, we can feel, we can dream, we can submerge inside our emotions, our spirits. Because a human being without spirits is like a story without a narrator or a teller or even a title, or I don't know. So thank you very much for your listening. Thank you. I do appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much, Kamal. That was lovely. Thank you very much. Great. So I'm going to be here again in 2 weeks' time, 2 Sundays from now, and onwards until we get to the 20th of November, when I'm going to go to Marrakesh, and I'm going to do this from the Storytelling Centre. Now, the great and the good and the famous, I don't know who's going. Baba, are you? Norman? Colin, are you going over to the February Festival? Yeah, there's lots of people going over. I know, Despina, I think you're going, aren't you? Oh, we'll have to have a word with John.
I'm working on being there in February.
Yeah, well, I'm not going in February, but so my colleague Amy Douglas is going to be there, and Kath Edwards.
Amy's good people.
Yeah, oh, Amy.
Is Amy better now? Last time I heard, well, it was a long time ago, but she was ill.
Amy's better. She had COVID, but she's better now. Yeah, yes. I saw her Friday, and she's looking well, and she's looking really on top form and everything else. Right, so Janice, I don't know if I'll see you tomorrow morning, but thank you very much. I can't do this unless people like you come along and tell me stories. So thank you very much for being here. Valentina, it was lovely for you to come, and I hope you come again.
Thank you, I will.
Beautiful. Yeah, come along, and that's it. I'm going to leave it open for 5 minutes.
Tuesday, we have our International Young Storytellers. I think that's 5 p.m. British time. So I just want to remind anybody, please, if you know anyone 25 and younger, invite them to attend and perhaps share a story with us on Tuesday, 5 p.m. British time.
Yeah, if you go onto the World Storytelling Cafe site, you will see that there's a whole program coming up between now and Christmas. John Rose working really hard at it and everything else. And it's lovely to be here. Go on, Camille.
Yeah, excuse me for interruption, but I would love to share with you something important, which is this idea Babasi said already, that how to call for, let's say, a community of young people. Yeah. So to inform you, because I work as a teacher, English teacher at Hina Cafe, I think that the more students will come to join us to this beautiful cafes. Okay, this is the good news. Yeah.
Absolutely. And when I come over to Marrakesh, perhaps we could arrange for me to visit with them. I would love to do that.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. Right. I'm going to call it. So that's it for tonight. Thank you very much for being here.
Until
Colin,
the
it's
next
always a
time.
pleasure to be here. And you can tell us all the gossip about what happened at Cape Clear another night, mate. I'm sure there's always gossip from Cape Clear.
I will do.
Okay, mate. See you there. Ta-da, ta-da.
All right.